My son-in-law stood at the head of my kitchen table on Christmas morning and told me I had 30 days to find somewhere else to live. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't apologize. He just set a manila envelope on the table next to my coffee cup, slid it toward me with 2 fingers, and said, "We've already spoken to a lawyer. It's all in there." My daughter was standing behind him, arms crossed, looking at the window above the sink. Not at me, at the window. I'm Olivia Jean Moore. I'm 68 years old, and that morning, with my Christmas ham already in the oven, and the smell of brown sugar and cloves filling every room, I learned what my generosity had been worth to the people I loved most. But let me go back to where this really started, because it didn't start that Christmas morning. It started the way most disasters do. Slowly, quietly, disguised as something that looked almost like love. My husband Franklin passed in March of 2020, right as the world was shutting down. He had a stroke in the middle of the night, and by the time the ambulance came, he was already gone. 39 years we were married. 39 years of Sunday dinners and bad television and arguing over the thermostat. 39 years of the same man reaching for my hand in parking lots without even thinking about it. And then one morning I woke up and he was just gone. The grief was something I wasn't prepared for. I don't know why. We all know it's coming eventually, but nothing prepares you for the specific quiet of a house that used to hold someone. Our daughter, I'll call her my daughter throughout this, because she is, even now. She was 34 then. She'd been married to her husband. I'll call him my son-in-law for about 2 years. They lived 40 minutes away in a rental apartment. She called me every day after Franklin died. She drove over on weekends. She sat with me and let me talk about nothing and everything, and her father, and for about 6 months. I thought we were going to be okay. I thought we were going to get through this together. Then in September of 2020, she called me with what she framed as a favor she was doing for me. "Mom, we've been talking, and we're worried about you being in that big house alone. It's too much for one person. We want to come stay with you. Just for a while. Just until the market settles down and we can find something we can actually afford." The housing market was genuinely insane that year. That part was true, and she wasn't wrong that the house was too big for me. Franklin and I had bought it in 1998, a 4-bedroom colonial in a suburb outside of Columbus, Ohio. Good school district, big backyard. We paid $187,000 for it, and it had appreciated considerably since then. I said yes. Of course I said yes. She was my daughter, and I had 4 bedrooms, and I was sleeping in only one of them. They moved in with a moving truck full of furniture they promptly put in storage because there was no room for it. My son-in-law made a comment about my living room sectional being dated. I let it go. The first few months were fine, or fine enough. My daughter cooked dinner sometimes. My son-in-law was polite in the way that people are polite when they're performing politeness rather than feeling it. He worked in commercial real estate. She did event planning, or at least she had been before the pandemic shut everything down. They were both working from home and they were together in my house all day every day, and slowly, the way water reshapes stone, things began to shift. It started with small comments. My son-in-law mentioning that the internet package I had was too slow for serious work and upgrading it himself, and then telling me, not asking, that he'd added it to my utilities bill. My daughter rearranging the pantry because it didn't make sense the way it was organized. The guest bathroom becoming their bathroom, with his shaving equipment on every surface and her skincare products covering the entire counter, so that when my friend from church came to visit, there was nowhere for her to put her purse. I told myself it was an adjustment period. I told myself they were stressed. I told myself to be patient. The year came and went, then another. My daughter's event planning business started picking back up in late 2021 when venues began reopening. My son-in-law got a significant commission in early 2022. I know because I heard him on the phone in the backyard celebrating, and he told me about it at dinner with a pride I was glad to see. I waited for the conversation about moving out. It didn't come. What came instead was a new SUV in the driveway, then a vacation to Scottsdale. Then I noticed the boxes arriving, always addressed to my daughter, always from places like Anthropologie and Williams-Sonoma. I saw the labels before they went to the recycling bin. I wasn't snooping. They were right there. By Christmas 2022, they'd been living with me for over 2 years. I asked my daughter once, gently, over coffee in late October, whether they'd been looking at houses. She got quiet in a way that made me feel like I'd said something wrong. The market is still rough, Mom. We're being strategic. You always say you love having us here. I did say that. I had said that earlier. I stopped saying it out loud after that, and then came Christmas 2023. I'd been cooking since the day before. Franklin's mother's sweet potato pie, green beans with smoked turkey, cornbread from scratch, the ham. My sister Bernadette was coming from Indianapolis. My cousin Theo and his wife were driving up from Cincinnati. My daughter's in-laws weren't visiting. They were spending Christmas in Florida, so it was going to be my family, a good group, a real holiday. My son-in-law came into the kitchen at 9 in the morning while I was basting the ham. My daughter was somewhere upstairs. I heard him before I saw him. His particular walk, that flat-footed confidence he had, like he owned whatever floor he was walking on. He said he needed to talk to me about something important. He set the envelope on the table. He explained that they had found a house, a new construction in a development called Maplewood Estates about 8 miles away. 4 bedrooms, 3.5 baths, 2-car garage, $620,000. Their mortgage was approved. I said that was wonderful. I meant it. Some part of me felt genuine relief. Then he said the second part. This house, my house, the house Franklin and I bought in 1998, the house where my daughter grew up and learned to ride a bike in the driveway and had her senior pictures taken in the backyard, was, according to my son-in-law, the logical solution to their down payment problem. I didn't follow him at first. I asked him what he meant. He explained it calmly, like he'd rehearsed it. They couldn't quite swing the down payment on Maplewood Estates on their own. But if I were to sell this house, and they received their fair share as family, that would cover it. He actually used that phrase, their fair share, of my house, that Franklin and I bought before my daughter was 10 years old. Alternatively, he said, I could sign the house over to them. He'd already researched it, apparently, and they would rent it out. I could use some of the proceeds to move into a more manageable situation. He'd brought a brochure for a senior community called Hearthstone Village. He slid that across the table, too. I looked at the brochure. I looked at the envelope. I looked at my son-in-law. I said, I see. He blinked. He'd been expecting something else. Tears, maybe. Argument. Some version of me that needed to be managed. I said, the ham has another hour and a half. I'm going to finish basting. He stood there another moment, then walked back upstairs. I turned back to the stove. My hands were completely steady. I don't know why. Maybe because some part of me had been waiting for this. Maybe because when you've spent 3 years watching someone look at your home the way my son-in-law looked at it, like inventory, you've already begun to grieve what you're about to lose, and you've also already begun to fight back in the quiet parts of yourself. My daughter came down an hour later. She couldn't look at me directly. She talked about the weather. She asked if I needed help with the green beans. I said no. She poured herself coffee and went back upstairs. My family arrived that afternoon. I served the dinner. I smiled. Bernadette kept looking at me with that particular look she gets when she knows something is wrong and is waiting for me to say it. I didn't say it. Not yet. I gave everyone pie and sent them home with leftovers and hugged my cousin's wife for a long time in the doorway without explaining why. That night, after my son-in-law and daughter had gone to bed, I sat in the living room in the dark for a long time. I thought about Franklin. I thought about the specific way he laughed at his own jokes before he finished telling them. I thought about what he would say if he could see what was happening in his house. I already knew what he would say. He would say, you know what to do, and the thing was I did. The next morning I called my sister. Bernadette is 2 years older than me. She worked as an HR director for a hospital system for 27 years. She is the least sentimental person I have ever loved, and she is absolutely ferocious when someone she cares about is being taken advantage of. When I told her what had happened, she was quiet for 4 seconds. I counted, and then she said, call Howard. Howard Pemberton had been Franklin's attorney. He'd handled our estate planning, our wills, the deed to this house. He was 70 now and semi-retired, but he'd known us since 1999, and when I called his cell phone at 9 in the morning the day after Christmas, he answered on the second ring. I told him everything. He listened without interrupting. Then he asked me to locate our property deed and read him the ownership language. I went to the filing cabinet in the study. Franklin had been meticulous about paperwork, God bless him, and I found the deed within 5 minutes. Joint tenants with right of survivorship, both our names. When Franklin died, the property passed to me automatically. His name was no longer on the deed. I was the sole owner. There was no fair share to be claimed. There was no legal pathway by which my son-in-law, or my daughter for that matter, had any ownership interest in this property. Howard said, and I am quoting him directly, "Olivia, what he's describing is not a negotiation. What he's describing is a shakedown. He has no legal claim to this house. None. Zero. You could ask them to leave tomorrow and you would be within your rights." I sat in the study chair, the same chair Franklin used to fall asleep in reading, and felt something move through me. Not quite anger. Something colder and more useful than anger. I asked Howard if he could help me understand what my options were and whether there was anything I didn't know about my situation that I should. He said, "Why don't you come in Thursday and bring your financial documents?" I said I would. Then I did something I hadn't done in 3 years. I went to Franklin's desk and opened the bottom drawer and pulled out the accordion folder where he kept printed statements for all our accounts. I hadn't looked at them since he died. Our financial advisor, a woman named Patricia I'd spoken to twice in 3 years, sent quarterly reports to this address, and I'd been filing them without reading them because looking at them meant confronting the fact that Franklin wasn't here to look at them with me. I sat at that desk and I read every single one. I want to be clear about something. Franklin and I were not wealthy in the way people mean when they say the word wealthy. We were not flashy. We did not take expensive vacations. I drove a 2017 Honda CR-V. Franklin drove a Ford F-150 that was 11 years old when he died. We shopped sales. We cooked at home. We found joy in things that did not cost money. But Franklin worked at the same engineering firm for 31 years and we saved. Every year, without fail, we put away a meaningful portion of what he earned. When he got raises, our lifestyle stayed the same and our savings rate went up. When the market dipped, we did not panic. We had a financial advisor who was conservative and consistent, and we trusted her and stayed the course. What I found in that accordion folder, reading statement after statement at my dead husband's desk the day after Christmas, was this: a Vanguard retirement account, $712,000. A Fidelity brokerage account, $438,000. A money market account at our local credit union, $94,000. Franklin's pension from the engineering firm, which had been paying out $2,800 per month and would continue to pay a survivor benefit to me indefinitely. Social Security survivor benefits, $900 per month. Total investable assets, just over $1.24 million. My son-in-law had looked at a 68-year-old widow living quietly in a 4-bedroom house, driving an 8-year-old SUV, clipping digital coupons at Kroger, and he had assumed there was nothing there. He had assumed I was the easy part of his financial plan. I put the statements back in the folder. I went upstairs. I changed into my good clothes. Then I came back downstairs, made coffee, and sat at the kitchen table with a legal pad and began to write down everything I remembered from the past 3 years. Every comment, every rearrangement, every package delivered, every vacation taken, every conversation about moving out that never went anywhere. I also started thinking about something else, something that had been sitting at the edge of my mind since the morning before. My son-in-law had said they were approved for a mortgage on a $620,000 house. He'd said they couldn't cover the down payment without my help. On a $620,000 house, a conventional down payment would be somewhere around $124,000. He was in commercial real estate. My daughter's business had recovered. Between the two of them, they made decent money. How did they not have $124,000 saved after 3 years of living rent-free in my house? 3 years, rent-free. In a neighborhood where comparable properties rented for $300 to $3,800 per month, that was conservatively $115,000 in free housing. Where had it gone? I started looking more carefully, not snooping. They'd left things in common areas on the kitchen counter, in the recycling bin, in plain sight. A credit card statement left on the kitchen table. A document from a car dealership for the SUV my son-in-law had bought in 2022, financed at $71,000. A folder my daughter had left on the counter that I'd assumed was event planning paperwork. It wasn't. It was a statement from a credit card I hadn't known she had. The balance was $22,000. They hadn't saved nothing because they couldn't. They hadn't saved because they hadn't tried. The Thursday appointment with Howard was 4 days away. I spent those 4 days being normal, making meals, asking about their days, smiling in all the right places. My son-in-law seemed to think our Christmas morning conversation had gone well. He was oddly relaxed, even friendly, in a way he hadn't been in months. He had every reason to believe he'd made his play, and now it was simply a matter of waiting for me to accept it. He didn't know that my sister was coming to town Wednesday night. He didn't know she'd arranged to stay at a hotel instead of my house, so that he and my daughter wouldn't know she was here. He didn't know I'd been on the phone with Howard twice more before Thursday, or that I'd spoken to our financial advisor, Patricia, who reacted to the situation with a brisk fury that surprised me coming from someone I'd always considered quite measured. Patricia said to me, "Olivia, I want you to know something. You are one of the most disciplined savers I have ever worked with. You and Franklin made every right decision for 40 years. What is being proposed here is an attempt to take the results of that discipline from you. I will not allow that to happen without a fight, and I suspect you won't either." She was correct. Thursday morning, Bernadette picked me up at 9:30. I told my daughter and son-in-law I had a doctor's appointment. My son-in-law offered to drive me, which was the first time he'd ever offered anything of the kind, and I understood the offer for what it was, a desire to know where I was going and with whom. I said I was fine and I'd be back by noon. Howard's office was in a brick building downtown, the kind of office that has actual books on the shelves and a receptionist who's worked there for 20 years. When Bernadette and I walked in, Howard was already in the conference room. Patricia was on the phone. He'd arranged for her to join by video. And there was someone else, a woman named Deborah, who Howard introduced as his colleague who specialized in elder financial protection law. I want you to understand what happened in that room, not as a dramatic confrontation, but as a very calm, very methodical unraveling of a plan that had depended entirely on my ignorance. Howard walked through the property situation first, my sole ownership, the absence of any legal claim, the specific language of Ohio property law that made what my son-in-law had proposed not just unrealistic but potentially actionable as an attempt to defraud. Deborah used the phrase elder financial abuse and explained precisely what it covered and what the consequences could be. Then Patricia spoke. She laid out our financial picture in plain terms, the accounts, the income, the total, and then she laid out what 3 years of rent-free living had actually been worth and what it appeared had been spent instead. Then Howard looked at both of us over his reading glasses and said, "Olivia, you don't owe them a single thing. They owe you. But I understand you're not here to go to war with your daughter, so let's talk about what you actually want." What I wanted was simple. I wanted my house. I wanted my autonomy. I wanted my daughter to have a chance to understand what her husband had been doing, even if she'd been complicit in it. And I wanted to make absolutely sure this never happened to me again. Howard drafted a formal notice that afternoon. Not eviction, not yet. A notice of change in living arrangement with a 60-day period for them to find and secure alternative housing, and a clearly stated expectation that they would make no further requests of my financial resources or property. I came home at 12:15. My son-in-law was eating lunch at the kitchen counter. He asked how the doctor's appointment went. I said everything was fine. I set my purse on the table. I sat down across from him. I put the notice on the table. He picked it up. He read it. The color changed in his face in a way I hadn't seen before. He started to say something about how this wasn't what we discussed, how they had been trying to help me, how I was going to be alone in this house again, and what was I going to do then? I said, "I'll manage." My daughter came downstairs about 20 minutes later, after he'd gone to find her. She was crying before she sat down. She kept saying she hadn't thought it would go this far. She said she knew it wasn't right, she'd known for a while. She said she loved me. I believed her on that last part. I have thought hard about whether to believe her on the other parts. I said, "You have 60 days. I hope you'll use that time to have some honest conversations, including with yourself." I got up and put on the kettle because it was cold outside and I wanted tea, and also because I needed something to do with my hands that wasn't reaching across the table and shaking her by the shoulders. They were gone in 44 days, not 60. 44. They found a rental apartment. Not Maplewood Estates, not the $620,000 new construction, a two-bedroom rental in a complex on the east side of Columbus. My son-in-law did not speak to me after the day I served the notice. My daughter texted me on the day they moved out. A single message that said, "We're all loaded up. I'm sorry, Mom, I mean that." I read it 4 times. I still don't know exactly what she meant. The first night alone in my house, I myself dinner. Chicken soup from scratch the way Franklin liked it. I ate at the kitchen table with the overhead light on, and every room quiet and mine, entirely mine, and I did not cry. I felt something more complicated than sadness and more durable than anger. I felt like myself. It has been 8 months now. The house is the way I like it. The furniture is back where it belongs. I grow tomatoes and zucchini in the side garden, and I share them with Mrs. Ellison next door. And I am in a water aerobics class on Tuesday and Thursday mornings. And I have dinner with Bernadette every other week, either in person or over video call. And my life is quiet and full in the way that only becomes possible when you stop making room for people who were filling space without filling anything else. My daughter called in March, just to call. No request attached, no agenda I could detect. We talked for 20 minutes. It was careful, but it was real. She told me she and her husband were in couples counseling. She didn't say much beyond that, and I didn't push. She called again in April and May. The calls are getting a little easier. Not easy, I won't say easy, but easier. I've thought a lot about what I would have done differently. I think about whether I should have set terms from the beginning, whether I should have trusted my own discomfort sooner, whether loving someone completely means loving them without conditions, or whether that kind of love is actually a disservice to you both. 63 when they moved in. I thought I was doing something generous and good. Maybe I was. But I've decided that generosity requires honesty to function. You can give someone a roof over their head and a free place to land while they get on their feet. But you cannot give them your sense of self, your boundaries, your house, your future. Those things are not available for giving. They belong to you. They are you. Franklin would have figured this out faster than I did. He always had a clearer eye for people's motivations than I did. But I think he also would have understood why it took me as long as it did, because he knew me, and he knew that I always needed to be absolutely certain before I moved. I'm certain now. I'm sitting on the back porch with my coffee, and the tomatoes are coming up, and Mrs. Ellison is waving at me from her driveway, and the morning is entirely peacefully mine. I spent 39 years building a life with a good man, and I spent 3 years letting other people slowly try to dismantle it, and I spent 8 months putting it back exactly where it belongs. I am 68 years old, and I have $1.24 million in the bank, and a paid-off house and a garden that does exactly what I ask of it. I am not winding down, not even close.